Olivia's. You see, Elizabeth's there. Great, thank you very much everybody for coming. The talk today is on the use of shadows in photography and art. And we're going to look at this. There's a point in history where art and photography come together and the development of shadows then become more prevalent and more obvious. And we're going to take a kind of a journey down this route. Now, in order to fit enough information into an hour, and time is not our friend, of course, I've had to kind of editorialize a lot and leave out quite a few artists that I would have liked to have included. So, as an example, in the Renaissance, there are over 50 Italian painters. Well, we're not going to fit them all in here in an hour-long lecture. So, I've had to take elements. Hi, guys, come on in. Gaetano, hello. So I've had to editorialize and choose ones that I find interesting myself rather than ones that are important in the kind of art history field, okay? So let's see if this thing works. Oh yeah, okay. So when we go through the slides, actually, should we switch off the lights a little bit, maybe? This grayscale is going to be on the side of the is that all right like that? Or do you want the back one off as well? Yeah. Back one off as well? Okay. So this grayscale here is going to be at the side of every slide. And it's an aid, really. This is an old grayscale that we use in analog times. It's called the zone system. And there are 11 zones of brightness here. And as you can see, zone zero is absolutely black. There is no detail in zone 0. No detail whatsoever, okay? And the same applies to zone 10, okay? There is absolutely no detail in zone 10. It's the brightest bright, okay? So between them, we have various amounts of grayness, various amounts of brightness. This zone system was developed by a guy called Fred Archer and Ansel Adams back in 1939 to give an empirical measurement or guide to black and white photography. Now, this lecture really is an insight into how photographers see, because we're a very peculiar bunch. And we see things slightly differently, even to painters, we see things slightly differently. Okay? Why am I saying that? Well, we pay particular attention to brightness variation, okay, in a scene. We pay particular attention to shadows, more so than any other artistic discipline. Photographers pay very great detail to they pay a lot of attention to shadows. And it's controlling the density of the shadows that we as photographers are interested in. What does that mean? The density of a shadow can range from zone 9 all the way down to zone 0, okay? So when we look at some paintings as we go through the lecture scene, when we go through these paintings, reference the shadow to a point on this scale. Have a look at the shadow and think, and ask yourself, where does it fit in the scale, okay? So in this scale, of course, you can see 5, 6, and 7, zones 5, 6, and 7 are designed to fit human skin, okay? And that's where we'd like to place the brightness of human skin when we're measuring a scene with the camera, okay? So let's just go forward here. Okay, so just by way of a preliminary skirmish, what I'd like to just introduce you to is something called Vanta Black, okay? And as you'll find, as we go through the lecture this evening, black is incredibly important for photographers. It's also very important for painters. But for photographers, it's especially important because it's what we need to use or control for creating shadows. Okay, so this is Vanta Black. It's Vanta Black 1010, okay, 1.0, and it was developed in sort of 2014 and released in 2015 to the general public. supposed to be the blackest black ever made. It's the nanotubes. It's a woven nanotube sheet. And it's so dark that they say it's the darkest material ever made. It's actually made for telescopes and the military. But the company in England that produced this decided they wanted to open it up to the art world. But they only gave one artist the right to use this. And the artist's name who now has the world rights to using this as an artist is Anish Kapoor, very famous Indian British artist. He managed to get the world rights to use this material for artistic purposes. And of course the rest of the art world, all the other artists like myself, we were up in arms because we don't think that's very nice, just because he's a millionaire, that he takes control worldwide of the darkest matter ever possible, when, as you know, photographers need black. Black is incredibly important, as I said before. So everybody was up in arms about this. Why would somebody who just purely, with filthy lucre, buy the rights, the world rights to the darkest material ever? We know why he wants to use it, but it should be open to everybody. Now, so what happened was when Anish Kapoor bought the copyright, the world rights to Vanta Black, this is Anish Kapoor. When that happened in 2015, somebody else then said, okay, I'm going to make the pinkest pink. And this guy was called Stuart Semple, and he said, I'm going to let everybody in the world buy my pinkest pink, except Anish Kapoor. He's not allowed to buy it. Okay, so you can. What I'm trying to kind of eke out here is that artists pay very particular attention to colors and brightnesses. Okay, black isn't a color, of course; it's a pigment, but it's not. It's only a brightness. So Stuart Semple then said, Kapoor can't have it. Everybody else can buy it off me, but Kapoor, you're not getting this color. That's it. Okay, and then recently, I think last week. Surrey Nanotechnology introduced Vanta Black 2.0. 99.96% absorbent. It's the darkest material ever. And come on in. Not at all. And it's so dark that if you passed a laser across it, the beam of the laser would just disappear. There's some seats over here, look. So what I'm kind of talking about here is the importance or the relationship between artists, vertically, so artists that are living, how they interact with each other, and horizontally, how artists look back on previous works of art and the previous work of other artists, and they learn from it. And photography is an art form that's embedded in the art, in art history, okay? And for the younger photographers here, it's really critical to have an interest in art before you even try to mature as a photographer, okay? And hopefully, as we go through this lecture, you'll see how it's affected my own work, okay? If we've time at the end, I'll show you some of my own work. So there's the pinkest pink and the blackest black. So I mentioned at the very beginning, photographers think and see slightly differently to all the other artists in the world. And the reason for this is they are acutely aware that our eyes can trick us. Okay? When we look at a scene, if the scene has a lot of dark in it, our eyes, it's called, there's a term for this, it's called context dependency. Okay? It's part of cognitive science, where our eyes look at a scene and they will automatically brighten the scene for us or darken it according to the luminosity, the brightness, the overall brightness in the scene itself. So in a scene like this, yeah, it kind of looks okay. This is outside the Western Gateway down below. But what does it look like to a photographer? Okay? And as I said before, photographers think a little differently. They actually think and see in black and white, because that's the only way they can understand the brightness in a scene is in terms of that grayscale, and that's black and white. Okay, so let's have a look at this from a photographer's point of view. Now, I just walked past the Western Gateway a couple of days ago. I saw the shadows and I thought, oh, this is great, we can use it for the lecture. This is what it looks like to a photographer. Slightly different, okay? We try and understand how dense, how dark are those shadows when we look at them with our eyes. And that's difficult because of this context dependency that biology, the biology of human sight, is totally dependent on that. It's not only dependent on this context dependency when it comes to brightness, but also to color. If, for instance, the picture was divided between pink and green, it would actually be very, very confusing for our eyes. Our eyes wouldn't know how to adjust because the signals are so, the color signals are so strong. So context dependency is something that photographers understand. Why do they understand it? They understand it very clearly because if the scene is too bright or too dark, they can make physical adjustments to the lens and the camera. Okay? We can't do that with our eyes. We can't, change the shutter speed with our eyes or change an aperture with our eyes. We have to just look at it and say, yeah, okay, right? But photographers don't have to do that. They think in terms of black and white and this context dependency. So here's another one. As I mentioned before, context dependency applies to the brightness in a scene, but it also applies to the color in a scene. Our eyes automatically adjust for the color in a scene as well. And we'll see now what happens to how the shadows really look when we look at them with our eyes. Okay? And when we look at them as a photographer, we're looking at them in terms of black and white. Now, we note here, this is a colored shadow. Right? There are certain times of the year where the shadows can be colored. It's a normal procedure. It's predicated on the ambient light, not the sunlight now, the ambient light of the sky. And if the sky is very, very blue, the reflection of that blueness colors the shadows. Leonardo knew this. In fact, as we go through this, you'll see that colored shadows are one of his big obsessions. Okay? So, just by way of a kind of a continuing skirmish here, we're going to just look at the kind of characteristics of shadows first, because there are, and this Leonardo da Vinci and other people around that period, the beginning, sort of early part of the Renaissance, they were able to understand that a shadow was made up of two parts. Actually, it's made up of three parts, but for us, for artists, it's the third part isn't important. We have the umbra, that's the darkest part of the shadow. Okay? And then we have the penumbra. This is this very soft gradient from the bright background to the dark background. And it's this gradient here that photographers are particularly interested in. Because photographers, naturally, they work with light, they manipulate light, they can control this particular area here very, very skillfully. Okay? What this does, of course, is when we look at a shadow like that, it tells us a lot about the atmospheric conditions in that scene. We don't see clouds, we don't see sky, we don't see the light source, but it tells us a lot about the light source and the ambient light that's in that, that's lighting the shadow. Because the shadow's not black, is it? It's, if we had our scale here to be somewhere down here by 2 or something like that, right? It's not completely black. That means light is reflecting from somewhere, off the egg, but also off the ambient light in that room. So we have the umbra and the penumbra, and the skill for us as photographers and as for artists is to reflect on the shape of this gradient here. Okay? So as we go through the work this evening, you will be paying attention to that, hopefully. Which are we going now? Okay, so this classification of the types of shadows actually comes from Leonardo da Vinci. He classified types of shadows. There are 3 types of shadows, basically. There's a cast shadow. That's a shadow that's cast by an object onto something else. It's not the shadow of my nose on my cheek. That's a form shadow. A cast shadow is a shadow of my body onto another object or another shape. Okay? So this is a classification system that Leonardo da Vinci invented or wrote down or codified in his codex, and we still use that today, cast shadows and form shadows. Just very quickly, we won't spend too much time on this. You can see, though, from the effect of a point light source, a very small light source, on the gradient around the shadow there. It's very sharp, okay? A soft light source, okay, produces a very pronounced penumbra, okay? So we can tell, looking at this, photographers can, they can tell what kind of light source is lighting a scene purely on the width or the size of the penumbra itself. Okay, so we'll skip that. That's too not important. So, yeah, let's get on with the essence of the lecture tonight. So, I was thinking about where to start, and where would you start at looking at the beginnings of shadow development in art, in at least in Europe, anyway. Okay. And it occurred to me that, okay, there is some literature available, okay. One is, for instance, the Allegory of the Cave, Book 7 of Plato's Republic. It's written around about 380 BCE, okay. And in this Book 7, he has the Allegory of the Cave. Now, it's not about light and learning to see light. It's more about learning to look for the truth. But in the Allegory of the Cave, of course, he uses shadows to explain how poorly we see. See in inverted commas, because he's thinking about more a philosophical approach to the shadows. But certainly he used shadows in his example, and he used shadows in a cave in his example of how poorly we see. So the idea behind it was, just very quickly, is there were these guys chained to a wall to the back of the cave. They were looking at the back of the cave, and somebody at the entrance of the cave lit a fire, and somebody walked between the fire and the guys in the cave with objects, a tree, a boat, a person, and these, as they went between the light from the fire and the cave wall, they cast shadows on the back of the wall. And that's all these chained people could look at, were shadows on the wall. Now, when I kind of went back and read this, it was interesting. I thought to myself, well, if Plato is using shadows in such a special way, where does he get his references from? Purely for shadows. Now, around this time, trigonometry had been designed, and there was a Greek scientist who was able to measure his shadow and compare that to the shadow of the Great Pyramid, and extrapolate out of that the length of shadows, the height of the pyramid. So shadows were important at this period of time. They were important in philosophy, and they're important in mathematics. Okay, so we would expect to see around this time shadows in Greek art. Yeah? Okay. So we'll look at that in a minute. The other two gentlemen here, Pliny the Elder and Quintilian, they were thinking about the beginnings of art. How did art originate? Where did it originate from? And both Quintilian and Pliny the Elder, they came to the idea that it was a Corinthian maiden her boyfriend was leaving for some war, and she projected his shadow onto a wall, and the Corinthian maiden drew an outline of the shadow on the wall, and she kept the shadow. That's Pliny's musing on how the origins of art began, with how art began. So both Quintilian and Pliny thought of this, okay? But what I want to do now is just go on to think of Plato now, okay, 380 BCE, when the Republic was roughly written, okay? So there's the cave. This is a modern interpretation of the cave, right? And there the poor prisoners looking at the wall, and these objects are passed, fire's over here, these objects are passed, and that's their only view of the world, okay? So here we are, look at the date. 390 BC, okay, BCE it should be. There are no shadows here. And in fact, if you went through all the 5 classical periods of Greek or Hellenic art, you will not find any shadows. And, you know, I've spent some time looking at resources for this, and there are no shadows anywhere. Okay? The only shadows you're going to get in Greek art are from sculptures. Okay? But painting, two-dimensional painting, no shadows at all. And there are some art historians who think that there are examples of Hellenic art with shadows in there. Okay? They just haven't found them yet. Okay? So let's move on a little bit here. The guys we're going to come up to now, we're kind of look at the dates now. We're sort of Middle Ages, the Dark Ages really here, okay? And the three we're going to look at very quickly are Giotto, Brunelleschi, and Jan van Eyck, okay? But before I want to do that, I just want to show you one thing, which is kind of interesting because when you reflect the time difference, this time scale between this painting and the next, we call it a painting, this painting and the next one, it's a little shocking. This is from 1200 BCE. 1200 BCE. This is the Bayeux Tapestry, 1070 CE. So this 2,270 years difference between the two paintings, and there's actually no shadows in them. Okay? We have what we call Contrapposto, which is the positioning of the legs to indicate movement. That's an ancient form of art, but we don't see any shadows within the 2,270 years of between that previous painting and this one. So there are instances where 1,070, you know, painting is quite poor. The skills there were very poor, in fact, compared to what happened in the next few years. So here's another one. This is unknown, 600 CE. Again, no shadows. Okay, we have a little bit of what we call contrapposto. Well, maybe we don't, but we certainly have. There are no shadows there, really. Okay, we move it on to Giotto here. Now, this period, 1,300 onwards, Higer Road, coming in late again. Okay. The interesting moment in time is when artists decide to create room space or picture space, where they try to create volume in a picture. And it's at that period where painting joins shadows and perspective, linear perspective. Okay? And around this time, we can start seeing, you know, we see a bit of perspective here, those lines. We drew orthogonals down here, from there to there. They'd meet somewhere down here, okay? And if we look at the shadow detail underneath the Madonna's neck, you can see quite a lot of shadow there. In fact, if we go on a bit closer, wonderful shadows here. Okay, this is probably the earliest, one of the very earliest examples of European art with shadow development in there. And we can see it's a soft shadow. Look, there's no hard, lovely soft penumbra there. And we can relate that probably to somewhere down here. Yeah. What's happening with the development of shadows at this period is that they're using them to create form and depth and volume in the people they're painting. Okay, so we'll just go on again with one more from this Duccio. Again, the same period. What we have here are the beginnings of real linear perspective. Okay, it's off. It doesn't work very well. Look, that one's going in that direction. His lighting, if you want, is quite poor. Okay, Giotto was much better. If you look at the lighting on the figures here, it's all the same. They're all lit in the same way. They're all painted in the same amount of brightness. There we are. There's our orthogonals. They're slightly off. You can see that, right? So this is the Christ and the Samaritan lady, and we can see now it's starting to get the perspective, linear perspective. He's starting to put space in here. Look at that. That line goes across there. This one's going up there, so they're all off. Okay, they don't meet anywhere. If we draw the lines, we can see they actually don't meet anywhere. but they are making an effort at this period of time to create linear perspective. And the reason we're looking at linear perspective is that linear perspective and shadows are actually based on the same thing. They're based on projections, okay? Point projections from somewhere in space. So we expect shadows to follow a similar development as linear perspective does. This is an effect that was devised very, very early on in 1420s by a guy called Brunelleschi. Okay, he's a very famous Italian architect from Florence. And there's the Brunelleschi dome as well, which is very, very famous, largest dome in the world. He devised this tool for creating linear perspective. Okay? In fact, at the time, one of the key tools for creating perspective was the concave mirror. Okay, we know they had concave mirrors here because I'll show you one in a minute from the same period of time. The other tool they would have used for creating linear perspective was obviously the camera oscura, okay, which was a Chinese invention from the Han Dynasty, okay, and the camera lucida, okay, another device for creating perspective. But remember, perspective and linear perspective and shadows go hand in hand because they are both projections. Okay, this is the baptistry in Florence, and you can see how he's got multiple vanishing points. Okay, there's one there and one there. And he used this device, the first one I showed you, to learn the tools or learn the techniques of creating perspective. And as he did that, of course, he realized that shadows are really important. In fact, even for architects today, shadows are really, really important when they're designing their buildings. So, you know, perspective and shadows, linear perspective and shadows go hand in hand together. Well, this is just a detail from, you see the door here, there are panels. There was a competition in 1420 to develop these panels, and Brunelleschi actually won, and these are the panels that he designed. And what you have is foreshortening here. Some objects look bigger than others, okay, to create the illusion of depth. All right, this is Van Eyck now, okay. And do you remember I said one of the tools they used was a concave mirror, okay? Well, look at the back there. It's a wonderful concave mirror there. We're starting to get some very interesting logical orthogonals here representing perspective, okay? In fact, when you look at perspective and shadows together, it oscillates between Florence and Bruges and Madrid. Those are the three key, Bruges and Ghent, sorry, and Madrid. Those are the four key areas where shadows and perspective were developed during what we call the Renaissance period. Okay, so here, 1434, we're at the beginning of a little into the Renaissance period now. So here we are. Look at that. It's a wonderful drawing. You can't, you know, that's there's a thesis or a theory called the Hockney-Falco theory, which actually takes a concave mirror and places it in the baptistry door and creates exactly the same perspective that Brunelleschi created. So there is proof that Brunelleschi, amongst other artists, used tools to help them, okay? And if you look back at photography from our standpoint now, the history of photography goes way further back than the photography we're using as, you know, a lens and a light-sensitive back, because that started in 1830. Real, you know, the principles of photography go right back to the Han Dynasty, to the camera obscura. So let's have a look at Da Vinci, because this guy was absolutely obsessed with shadows. In fact, his codex, his writings, there are around about 7,000 pages of writings, which he started when he was 37. There are 7 books just on light and shadows. Okay? Titles like Why Are Shadows Blue? Right? Using artificial light to create shadows. All of these kind of things that we as photographers nowadays take for granted. They were all codified by Da Vinci. So here we can see, this is his, one of his drawings on the umbra and the penumbra. Interestingly enough, and I've often wondered about this, it might just be because it's a faded print, that there's never black. in his paintings. Okay? Even in his exercises on shadows, he never goes as far as this zone down here, ever. Now, why is that? Well, context dependency. He's looking at the shadows, and as he looks at the shadows, his eyes brighten the scene, so he's fighting against his own biology, trying to see into these shadows. So he can't ever see them. And what you'll see as we go through this lecture, there's a point where photography comes in and the shadows become really interesting, because we now have an extra tool, apart from the camera obscura and the camera lucida. We have an extra tool, and that is exposure time and contrast. So we can see these are the part of his codex here. Okay, so we're starting to see some shading here. This is kind of an exercise you'd be doing in college, lighting a box or an egg and trying to give it definition and grayness across the whole spectrum here. That's the dodecahedron. Now again, he hasn't gone as far as black here. Okay. Now I was thinking maybe he made a model of this, a plastic model of it, plastic as in cardboard, and hung it and then started to draw the shading. And light would have come off from the bottom of the table onto the bottom of it. So there's no black there. Okay. And that's kind of an interesting thing somebody should have a look at, I think, because you would expect with his analytical mind and his interest in obsession in shadows that you would find more blackness. Okay? And it's blackness we're looking at. We're looking at this thing here, down here, zone 0, yeah? Okay, so this is actually kind of a bit of Schadenfreude here, okay? Now, Schadenfreude is kind of a double-edged sword here because the guy is German, okay? This is a guy called Konrad Witz, okay, Konrad Witz. And he was a German painter, and he lived most of the time in Switzerland, but he didn't get his shadows right. Just look at this here. Look at that area there. Right? That bit of that shadow there, that should be way more distorted because it's at an oblique to the light source. It should be completely distorted, but he hasn't got it right there. So even though he's a very skilled painter, painters get it wrong sometimes. Okay, Konrad Witz, and he was a German painter. See that? The shadows. That shadow, that side's fine, but that shadow on that wall, it shouldn't be there at all. It should be completely distorted. All right, so we go to the next three painters. This won't take long. Okay. Caravaggio, Rembrandt, and Van Hoogstraten. That's for Frank here. Okay. Now, you can see the dates. We've gone up 100 years from the previous couple. Let's just have a look at Caravaggio. Now, it's actually kind of, timing's quite good for this because there's a wonderful Caravaggio exhibition up in Dublin, National Gallery. So hopefully this will generate some interest. But in the parlance of our time, Caravaggio was a badass. Okay? He was arrested for brawling, drunkenness, attempted murder, and my favorite, consorting with the devil. Okay? But he understood light. Okay? And what you can see here is he's using real rooms to create his work. This is light that you can only get in a room. You can't imagine it, not at that period of time. So that light, okay, and the darkness up here, okay, that's affecting the blackness of the shadows. The fact that it's a very big room, it's quite hard light source coming through here. It's the light, the hardness of the light, okay, see it on the sides here, is creating a very dark space up here. And that dark space affects the shadows. It affects the density of the shadows. Okay? If that room was completely white, those shadows would look a lot lighter. Okay? If there was a room, a window on the other side, that would look lighter, it would be lighter as well. But it's not. It's one of the first real attempts at creating atmosphere using shadows. Even Da Vinci wasn't this brave. Okay, this is Rembrandt. This is actually a self-portrait, and it's one of my favorite because it's one of the things I actually always regret when I see photographs nowadays, is that nobody takes photographs like this. Yeah? Nobody takes photographs. And the fact that it's, there's enough detail in there to recognize who the person is. We don't have to be spoon-feeding the public. There's wonderful shadows shadow development here. And this gradation here, this gradient between the light and the dark, that's called chiaroscuro, okay? Light and dark. It's a technique that Alberti and Da Vinci developed to create this to create this the soft movement between light and darkness. It's a real skill to creating that. So that's called chiaroscuro here, the way it goes from light to dark. Okay, so this is another Rembrandt piece, and it's actually really interesting because it's a segue out of this picture to Van Hoogstraten, in fact. So look at that cast shadow there. It's just a wonderful little joke going on here. Okay, and there's another bit up there. So although this is an etching, he was able to create a wonderful cast shadow. Now, maybe he was teaching his students something, okay? Because as it happens, Van Hoogstraten, who is a really famous and very, very important Dutch painter, does the same thing, okay? Look, the cast shadows here, okay? So he's kind of like it's like a tribute, if you like, to Rembrandt, who was his master. Van Hoogstraten was a student of Rembrandt's. Okay, so this is the bit I wanted to talk about very quickly, because isn't this not reminiscent of the allegory of the cave? Okay, and what he's doing here is he's projecting, as I said before, images onto the screen so that his students can actually learn how to draw figures, and foreshortening. Okay, so it's a very famous etching by Van Hoogstraten of his students working in his studio and looking at the shadows. Again, he's actually been quite brave and created quite dense, dark shadows there. Okay, Vermeer, Joseph Reiter Darby, and Francesco Goya. So, Vermeer, if you were studying photography or film, you would be studying the light in Vermeer, okay? People tend to think that he's the master of light, okay? I much prefer somebody else who we'll look at in a minute. Because when you look at Vermeer's light, and we look at the chiaroscuro there, look, going from light to dark, okay? We have some dark parts here, it's great, okay? But when you look at all his works together, and he actually only painted 34 paintings. Well, there are only 34 accredited to him, anyway. When you look at his work, I'm just going to go quickly through, you'll see similarities. Going back again. The light's always coming from the top left-hand corner. Okay? Oops, sorry. Okay? And it's all basically the same kind of light. So he was in a way, although his light was absolutely beautiful, he was a little bit lazy. He just waited for the soft light. He found a room, probably north light in this case, and he relied totally. He wasn't a person who liked to experiment really. He got his skill together and then he kept it. Okay? Because everything is top left-hand corner. In fact, when the Louvre in Paris analyzed, I think, 900 paintings, in their collection, they found something like 89% of the paintings, the sun came from the top left-hand corner. What does that mean? Well, majority of them were right-handed painters. Otherwise, you'd be painting in your shadow. Yeah? So if I'm a left-handed painter, there's a shadow coming, if the light is up there and I'm looking at it, you'd be painting in your shadow. So a lot of the painters just put the light where the shadow wouldn't fall interfere with their work. All right, Joseph Reiter Darby. We're going to come back to this picture when we get onto the photography side because it's actually kind of interesting. Again, you know, this is Moonlight over, think of the name, Moonlight over Dovedale. Okay? Now, it's still, you know, we're coming to the cusp or the end of the Renaissance period now, okay? It's Moonlight over Dovedale. Now, moonlight light, you'd expect the shadows to be a lot darker than that if this is done in moonlight, okay? And as we'll see in photography, we can get them darker, but because he relied on, or he was imprisoned, if you like, in this contextual dependency of his eyes, he had to, when he looked at the shadows, he saw stuff. It wasn't just black anymore. So Joseph Reiter Darby, right? However, when he then decided to go indoors and create light using artificial light, that's the first big step in the creation and controlling of shadows, okay? And this is a fine example because we have an artificial light source here. It's called the experiment with the bicycle pump. Some of my students who've been in class with me, we've actually recreated that in the studio with students participating. No birds or animals were hurt, okay? But you can see cast shadows and form shadows. There's a form shadow from that girl's nose there onto the side of her cheek. All this darkness around here, that's all cast shadow work. And as you get in closer to a light source, especially an artificial light source, your shadows get more dramatic. Okay, so this is my favorite artist, okay? This is Francesco Goya. And it's not because of this painting. This is called El Quintasol, the parasol, okay? Or umbrella, yeah. Again, it's got some shadow detail there, and we can see her face is lit up, so I don't know, unnaturally lit up really, because if the light is shining from up there somewhere, presumably, you'd expect her to be slightly darker, right? Again, he probably looked at it with his eyes and said, okay, context dependency, and it lit up better. This isn't the painting I'm really interested in. The one I'm interested in is coming up next after this. So that's Francesco Goya there, okay? So we have light coming from the top left-hand corner. Look at the shadow, the umbra and the penumbra here. It's kind of sharp, but not horrendously sharp. What's happened is, of course, the window is so big, it's been able to make everybody equally lit in the scene. And that's daylight. That's not artificial light, okay? And this is 1801, okay? Just pay attention to that date, 1801, okay? 1800s to 1801. Beginning of the Peninsular Wars, okay? So, let me just see what's the next one. Okay, yeah. So, what I would just want to pay is a segue out of this. There's our painting. He's painting something. There's Goya, okay? And this is King Carlos IV of Spain, okay? And his family. So what I want to do now is just very quickly segue out of this period back into 1656. And this is a very famous painting that philosophers and artists have kind of debated over for years and years and years. This is called La Infanta, the infant, or the chambermaids. Okay, and doesn't it? You see, although this is 1656, we go back to Goya in 1800. It's an homage, if you like, to Diego Velázquez. That's Diego Velázquez there. Okay, there are 11 people in this picture. Okay, that's Donna Mariana Augustina. That's the Margarita Teresa. That's the Infanta. Okay, and the daughter of the King of Spain is still called the Infanta in Spain at the moment, okay? So that's Margarita Teresa. This is Mary Barbola. She's German. This is Nicolas. He's Italian. This is Donna Marcella. And this is, no, that's Donna Marcella. That's Donna Lucia. Donna Lucia. And this is Diego Velázquez's brother, Don Jose. And that's Diego Velázquez. And there in the back there, King Philip IV of Spain, okay? And his wife Mariana. So it's an homage, and painters and artists love doing homages back, vertically and horizontally to reference other painters. So here we are, look at we can just see look at this, wonderful orthogonals here, okay? Look at the shadow down there. Quite a hard shadow in this case, not much of a penumbra. Again, then Picasso decided, okay, I'm going to do homage Diego Velázquez as well, and this is La Infanta, okay, the chambermaids, and you can see the Margarita Teresa here, you can see Mariana Augustina, you can see Mary Barbola here, that's her, Nicolas, the bodyguard in the back, there's Don Jose Velázquez. So it's a homage back again to one of the greatest painters ever, and that was Diego Velázquez. In fact, he went on, if I remember right now, this is another one, this is another homage on Diego Velázquez. This is the Infanta again, okay? There's a dog, there's the Infanta there, there's Mary Barbola, there's Mariana Augustina, and there's Don Jose in the background there. So he went on in 1 year and painted 58 versions of that painting. Okay, so what I'm trying, here's another version of it. It's just great to see that artists, and this is what I want to encourage the photographers among us, is to learn, look back and learn. Look out and of your own discipline and look at other works, other painters. So we're coming back to Goya now. This is one of my favorite. Again, we've got light and shade here, okay, right? This is the dream of reason creates monsters. Now, what happened between the Parasol painting, very naive and romantic, and this period here, okay? Look at this. This is in the yard of the lunatic asylum. This is the guy who painted La Quinta Sol. What happened between those two periods? Well, what happened was Goya went deaf, but also we have the beginnings of the Peninsular Wars against Spain and France. So he changed his style completely, and his lighting, and this is why I much prefer Goya to Vermeer, his lighting is very, very detailed and very exquisite. So you can see here, and his titles for his pieces are just wonderful. I mean, in the yard of the lunatics, yeah? The arrival of the witches. This is a really interesting guy now. He's become, he's not the court painter anymore. He's blossoming into some sort of very bizarre artistic creator. This is the arrival of the witches. And you can see here some lovely detailed shadows in that. This is the, I can't remember the name of this one. But anyway, look, you can see there's a candle there, okay? And its light is on him now, okay? So we're starting to see artificial light in painting. And when you get artificial light in painting, you then get darker shadows. Okay, this is the another one of his, can't remember the name of that now, just escaped me. This is Saturn eating his children, right? Now, remember La Quinta Sol, that was a very romantic period, right? Where he painted, Charles IV, he painted, court paintings. This is kind of very extreme now, right? In fact, all of his work, all of this work, they call it the Black Period, that was hidden away. He painted on the walls of his house, and they had to dismantle the walls to take them out after he died because he didn't want them shown to anybody. But some great stories, great themes, and great tragedy as well for somebody who's gone deaf. Okay, 3rd of May, very famous painting. Okay, this is the final one by Goya, which is an homage as well. And you can see now we're starting to get lots of shadows, lots of dark skies. And look what we got here. We got an artificial light source. Okay, this is the end of the Peninsular War now. It's kind of like a protest to France about the tragedy. The drawings he drew of the war are absolutely horrendous. You can't really show them to anybody. They're just, his etchings of the period were just horrific. So this is 3rd of May, okay? Again, we have Manet, okay? Very similar pose. This is the 3rd of May in Spain. This is Emperor Maximilian in Mexico being executed. Very same pose, okay? And then we have Picasso again, okay? The massacre in Korea, actually in Sinchon province in Korea, during the Korean War. At this time, Picasso was a communist, so he made the Americans, we're not sure this massacre was whether it was created by the Americans in the Korean War or by the Koreans themselves. Nobody actually knows. But Picasso, being a communist, blamed the Americans, and these are Americans in this case. Yeah. So, moving on very quickly, Manet, Van Gogh, and Picasso, I don't know how far we're going to go. Di Chirico and Francis Bacon. All right, 1821, horse racing in Epsom. Some of you might remember this, okay? This is, a typical painting of the period. The date is particularly important because photography hadn't really been invented then. We're looking at 1830, 1835 for the first images that were captured onto a screen, okay, onto a frame of some sort. So this is a guy called Giraud. He's a French guy, okay. But what I want to do is, I mentioned the word contrapposto, which means counterpoise, right? And you can see we have contrapposto here. Contrapposto really means bodies in action, okay, not at rest, okay? Just think of counterpoise. If I'm kind of standing like this, I'm not at rest, obviously, right? Okay. But what I want to do is just very quickly segue back to show you the heritage of Contrapposto. 28,000 years. It's Paleolithic, okay? Contrapposto. The approach to drawing action hasn't changed over 30,000 years. And we learn Contrapposto not from the Renaissance, not from Da Vinci or anybody like that. We learn Contrapposto from Paleolithic times. So here we are, this is horse racing in Epsom. Now, this date, just remember that photography hadn't really been invented by then. The first exposures were around 1830, and they took 8 hours. So there's no way you could photograph somebody moving, right? But around about 1870, the exposure time was 1,000th of a second. It's quite fast. You could capture stuff very quickly, stuff that's moving very quickly. And look at that, 1866, right? Look at that now for racing action shots. Look at the Contrapposto, the blur in there, the vibrancy, the action in it is just, beautiful. It's, imagine trying to paint horses galloping towards you. Even if you're going to draw them using a pencil, it would be impossible. You have to use cameras for this. There is absolutely no way you could ever draw this action coming towards you. You wouldn't have the memory capacity, okay? Yeah, going across your field of view, you can see it's repetitive all the time. You can kind of draw that, but not running towards you, not galloping towards you. This is physically impossible. And that's the influence, guys, of photography. 1,000th of a second exposure. Okay, so we're going on to Picasso. I'm moving on very quickly now. We know Picasso liked photography. He had cameras. He liked also to paint with artificial light. Okay? And he had these articulated lamps and stuff like that. And he painted at night with just one lamp because what he wanted were these dark shadows. Okay? This is still life with cow skull and vase or something, if I remember right. Okay? So we can see what he was doing here because we know that Picasso used artificial light. And once you start using artificial light, you get black shadows. You can control the shadows more. This is a collage, okay? Look at the lovely cast shadows here. This is just wonderful stuff. And they're nice and dense and dark. They're down here somewhere in our zone system, yeah? Okay, this is a blue pot and a jug. Again, we got some more. We've actually got, I bet this is a colored shadow, in fact. If Picasso had, if we'd seen an original, I bet that's blue because it would have reflected off the side of the pot. This is l'ombre, okay? A lot of his work is in French. Okay, l'ombre means shadow, one of my favorites. And you can see, because what he was thinking really here, that's light, dense, we know Penumbra here at all. And you can see now, this is Piazza d'Italia, okay? Is that the right pronunciation, Gaetano? Piazza Italia, okay, thank you. And it's, you can see the influence of photography on his shadow works here, okay? With 1913, you would expect him to have a camera and be able to capture slightly denser shadows than his eyes would allow him to see. Remember, context dependency affects how dark the shadows are that we see them. So, here's another one. This is, I think, Early Morning it's called. And this is the Melancholy of the Morning, this one. Again, nice, dense, dark shadows he's created. This might not have been a photograph, but he used photography to look inside those shadows, to control the density of the shadows. Moving on, this is the artist on the way to Tarazon. This is Van Gogh, yeah? Okay. What's interesting about it is we have a nice dark shadow, okay? We can't tell whether it's colored or not, okay? The sky doesn't look particularly dark or blue, so, maybe the shadows are just dark gray, not blue, right? But the interesting is that Van Gogh took his foot, painted it so that the foot is off the ground, and we can see he's in the process of moving because that shadow isn't joined to the foot. Now, moving on from here, of course, Francis Bacon, great Irish painter, decided to homage artists on the way to Tarazon. Okay? And there we see the shadow. Again, he was interested in the shadow importance. There we are. This is another version of Bacon's Artist on the Way to Tarascon. It's getting a little wilder now, but we can still make out the artist and some of the shadow effect here. And the diagonal is kind of critical in this because it matches the one with Van Gogh's. So he went on and did this series of so we're coming on to photography now, very quickly, okay? So the ones I've chosen are Martin Makowsky, okay? Paul Strand and Ansel Adams, very quickly. Martin Makowsky is a really interesting photographer. Look at the dates, okay? He died quite, mid-20th century. But he was a communist Hungarian who moved to Berlin during the beginning of the First World War and stayed there until it got too hot for him, being a communist. And he went to America, and he became a fashion photographer in America. And in the 1930s, this man was on a wage of $100,000 a year in the 1930s as a fashion photographer. So he had these large big cameras here that he worked on. Again, look at the shadows here, nice and dark. We can actually tell what kind of weather there is there. We can tell what the weather is like, the climatic conditions to create that sort of shadow are that you need dark blue sky, you need clear air, okay, and you need low light. This is a Makowsky one. I just put this in because I think it's a wonderful example of Contrapposto. It's just so full of energy. And it's, look, 1930, and he didn't have small camera. He had a big plate camera with him. Such a beautiful example of Contrapposto. Okay, we can see now Harper's Bazaar. Okay, Paul Strand again, using photography. Ansel Adams now, this is Moonlight on Snake River. Okay, does it ring a bell? There we are, Moonlight in Dovedale. So we can see that it's again an homage to Joseph Writer Darby, but you can see how much denser with photography we can get the shadow area because we can get over this contextual dependency or context dependency that affects our eyes. Photography allows us to jump that bridge. This is moonlight over half moon, moonlight over half dome. Okay, again, look at the dense shadows there. Dense shadows again. I think this is one of my favorite ones. Of course, if you want to control dense shadows, you have to sacrifice some detail in the lights. Okay, so we got white and we got black, but we got no gray tones in here. So very quickly, I'm going to just show you where my work is going to. We're finishing now, yeah, okay. So in the context of controlling shadows, this is just some of my own work, and I won't keep you any longer, where I'm trying to maintain all these gray areas here in the picture, but still have a very dense shadow. Okay? And this isn't done at night, this isn't done in a room somewhere, in a cave somewhere. These are landscape shots. These are done during daylight. And what I'm trying to do is find a way of creating black shadows, okay, but maintain the full range of these gray zones, which is actually quite difficult to do. In fact, if you have followed the lecture this evening, I've laid clues in this lecture as we've gone along as to how I do this. Okay, what are the criteria for creating images like this? So again, I'm trying to get them as dense as possible here. And you know, I could be accused by some people saying I shoot this at night with a lamp, right? Well, I don't. This is daylight. Okay, this is all daylight. Again, very dense shadows. Okay, we're finishing now, okay? So the books I want to reference books I just want to show you, and these might be of interest. In 1995, the National Museum National Gallery in London honoured E.H. Gombrich with an exhibition. E.H. Gombrich was the most important art critic or art historian of his era. He worked for the Warburg Institute in London, and he was an art historian. And they said to Gombrich, here we want to honor you with an exhibition. What would you like? And he said, shadows. This book is actually quite interesting. It gives you a lot of background detail into shadows in photography, in art. And you can see it's a lovely little cast shadow there, okay? This is actually, Frank, Van Hoogstraten, this painting. That reminds me, it's Van Hoogstraten, okay? Another one here, Victor Streuchita. He's an academic in Switzerland, short history of the shadow. Cassati, he's an Italian gentleman, and his book's really interesting. I recommend that if anybody's interested in looking at looking further into this area. And then, yeah, that's it. So, yeah, that's it, guys. I hope I haven't rushed it. Okay.
Do you want to answer a few questions?
Yeah, of course. We'll switch the lights on.